This is Hannibal here from the Hannibal TV on YouTube, and this is Unidentified Aerial Phenomena podcast with someone I'm honored to be talking to. When he retired from the military, he was a captain, but he was a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy, served 7 years on active duty, worked as a weapons controller, flew target drones, commanded intercontinental ballistic missiles as well as a launch officer. He also worked as an Air Force missile propulsion engineer on the Titan III program. And from 71 to 73, he worked as a safety and reliability engineer for Martin Marietta Aerospace and Rockwell International Space Shuttle design proposals is what he also worked on. Captain Robert Salas, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, Devin. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
That is quite a resume, and that's just up to the mid 70s. Could you tell us a little bit about your military background, a brief version of it?
Well, yeah, I went to the Air Force Academy, like you said, graduated, started primary flight school, but did not complete it. A long story there. Then I went into this, what was called then a weapons controller. Basically, we were training fighter interceptor pilots on performing intercepts of incoming aircraft. Part of that duty, I was able to fly a radio-controlled drone and use it as a target for these training sessions. And after that, I went into the missile field. I went through training for about a year, and then on to Malmstrom Air Force Base. I got there in 1966. Was certified, qualified with my commander, Fred Mywald, two-man team where we would go out and man the launch control center for 10, at that time, Minuteman I missiles. And we do that about every 3 days and alternate. And then after that, I finished my master's degree in aerospace engineering at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and then went to Los Angeles Air Force Station, worked in on the Titan III systems program office as a propulsion engineer. After that, about 1971, I resigned from the Air Force, worked for Martin Marietta and Rockwell International on their space shuttle proposals. Then went to work for Federal Aviation Administration as an aircraft certification engineer in structures, aircraft structures. And after about 22 years of that, I retired from the federal government and went to work as a public school teacher, teaching mathematics. Did that for another 17 years until I finally retired from that. And so I'm now trying to enjoy retirement as I try to age gracefully.
And you are an author now with your latest book is all about UAPs and the nuclear puzzle. Very relevant book to what's going on today. And that's available on Amazon along with your other books, which we'll get into. But being a former drone operator, just as far as what's going on right now, do you think some of these drones that have the red and green lights that people are filming around New Jersey and other areas of the United States, do you think some of them could possibly be for nuclear detection?
Yeah, that was a theory I heard last night, actually, for the first time. And this is from a post that was done on Facebook, but I heard it from my friend Earl Gray, and he wrote it up. It's on my Facebook page if anybody wants to read more about it. But the thought is that uh, at least some of these drones are trying to detect whether there are dirty bombs about at certain locations. Dirty bomb, of course, is um, standard explosive that could also disperse radioactive material and contaminate a site or area for a long, long time. And there may be a credible threat that the government has picked up and is trying to locate any dirty bombs that might have been brought into the United States using these drones. Um, Now, of course, that that would need to be confirmed by the government, but there's another possibility I just heard about last night.
And we're going to get into what you firsthand witnessed, but someone here is asking, from what you've seen, we've seen a lot of various different drones up in the air related to the last month or so, but are the unidentified aerial phenomena craft that you saw, do they look similar in any way to some of the current drones, or are these something totally different that we're seeing now?
Well, let me just clarify. I never saw the craft that disabled my missiles. I and my commander were located 60 feet underground. We were locked into a hardened capsule made of concrete and steel, and had a large door which we could not open until we were relieved by another crew. So even though I was getting reports real time of this object hovering above us, we could not go upstairs and take a look because it could have been a ploy, of course, for some kind of entry into our capsule, which would have been uh, a big threat because we had those missiles, of course, ready to go, and bad actor could have launched them. So uh, we had to stay locked in. I never saw the object, but it was described to me as a glowing red pulsating light with something inside the light that was hard to see because it was so bright. Uh, and it hovered just above us, above the front gate. All the guards were out there with their weapons drawn. I basically ordered to make sure the site was secure, use whatever means they had to do that. And no one was injured. There was no damage to the equipment. The missiles themselves received no permanent damage. They simply disabled the guidance system of the missiles, but they did it within seconds, and they did it by sending a signal through 60 feet of earth and concrete, penetrating a large cable, which was triply shielded against EMI, and intermittently cycling a piece of hardware that was part of the guidance system of the missile, thereby shutting it down.
I have to ask you, looking at the setup you're showing here of where you were stationed, what's it like being enclosed in that thing uh, on a weekly basis for multiple days? Because I believe your shifts were 24 hours. I imagine for a claustrophobic person, they wouldn't do too well down there.
I guess not. None of us were claustrophobic, or we would have been moved to a different assignment, I think. Uh, it was a little chilly at times. We had air conditioning down there because we had, I don't know if you remember the old radio tubes.
Yeah, I've seen them.
So the equipment had to be kept cool in order to keep the temperature from rising and burning circuits up. So it was a little cool down there. We had the noise from the when from the electronics running all the time. We didn't have the privileges we have now with silent electronics. But we felt no claustrophobia. It was mostly boredom. We did a little cot down there. We took turns taking naps because one of us had to be on alert status at all times. So it was fine. No real problems.
What was it like being responsible for intercontinental ballistic missiles during the Cold War times?
Well, at times we did think about it, and we had short conversations about it, but ultimately it was our duty, which we took very seriously, of course. And we would definitely have performed our duty of launching missiles if given the order in the correct manner. So we knew Russia was our enemy, China was our enemy at the time. We were fighting in Vietnam at the time. And so there were Cold War tensions. The Cuban Missile Crisis was in 1962, and I was there in 67, so it was only 5 years after that. So, yeah, there were times when things got tense a little bit, but like I said, we were all ready to perform our duties.
How did it help shape your perspective of global security without going into too much details, just with the information you had working in the military over the years?
Well, I think we all accepted the fact that since the enemy, let's say Russia at the time, had all these nuclear weapons, and by then they had already tested thermonuclear or megaton weapon up to 50 megatons. I think that's the equivalent of 50 million tons of TNT. We knew that this was a major threat, and they had the capability of launching missiles in our country. We felt this was an important thing to do, to be prepared to retaliate at a moment's notice.
As far as the Titan III program you're involved with, could you share some insights about your work as a missile propulsion engineer when you were in that program?
Well, the Titan III was used primarily as a means to put up satellites in orbit for the military, for military uses, of course. So these were mostly spy satellites, and it used a liquid propulsion system, which was pretty nasty. I think I remember the name of the main propellant was let's see, red nitrous oxide, I think it was called, red nitrous oxide, which is pretty nasty stuff, very corrosive. So we had to make sure that the propulsion systems were operating well. We at times did test launches from Vandenberg, and we had to monitor the contractors on all the tests they did. So it was an interesting program, and again, necessary, we thought at the time, to make sure we had our the satellites that we needed to monitor what was going on.
And you already discussed it a bit, but the main UFO incident that you were involved with, I think, was the fated giant 1967 Maelstrom Air Force Base incident. Could you describe in detail what happened during that incident?
Well, briefly, and again, Fated Giant is the first book I wrote in 2005, along with James Klotz, the man that helped me investigate and get some data from the Air Force under the Freedom of Information Act. It has a lot of those documents that were received in the back of the book. So, uh, anybody interested in this subject, I would recommend my book, Fated Giant, and you can get it on Amazon. But we were on duty on March 24th, 1967, near a place called Roy, Montana, which was about 100 and some miles to the east of Malmstrom Air Force Base. It was one of about 15 sites that we had. I think you've got a map there you could show. We had 15 launch control centers. That's it. And circled around those large dots there are smaller dots which show the launch facilities. They were about a mile or two away from our command center, and that's where the missiles were actually located. They were called launch facilities. So on March 24th, I was on alert status. My commander was taking a break, and first thing, I got a call sometime in the evening. I don't remember exactly what time, but it was dark out. And the main guard upstairs, we called the flight security controller, stated that they've been watching some strange lights in the sky above our facility, flying very fast, no engine noise, stopping on a dime, reversing course, making 90-degree turns at high speed. And he kept stating over and over, "These are not airplanes, sir." I even joked with him and said, "You mean like they could be UFOs?" I was joking, but in fact, we had seen reports in the local newspaper, the Great Falls Tribune, of people reporting lights in the sky, different colored lights, and so those stories had been in the paper all that previous week and before that. So I was joking with him, and he kept saying, "These are not aircraft, sir." And I had to take him seriously, of course. This was not a joke. We never joked around like that with our communications. So I thanked him for the report. I said, keep an eye on these things. Let me know if anything interesting happens. And and I hung up the phone. And so now about 5 minutes or so go by. And this time he calls back and he's screaming into the phone. Very frightened. I can tell by his voice he's frightened. He's babbling. He doesn't make any sense. I calm him down, and finally he says, "Sir, there's a glowing red object, pulsating at times. No engine noise, nothing, but it's hovering just above the front gate. And I've got all the guards out here with their weapons pointed at it. What should we do?" And he was probably asking me if they should fire on it. Of course, I didn't know what the heck this thing was, and I just told him. I said, "Make sure you secure the facility." That's really what their job was, to secure the facility. Of course, they had the authority to fire on any intruders they would try to get in our gated area. And we had signs up, of course, stating that. So then he said, well, one of the guards got injured. I've got to go. So he hung up the phone. I immediately looked over at our status board to see how our missiles were doing. They were all green at that time, ready to go. I went over to wake up my commander, who was taking a rest break. And just as I was about to tell him about the phone calls, we started getting horns go off in the capsule. And we knew what that meant. There was issues with the missiles themselves. We looked over. Two of the missiles had turned fault and showed a red indicator, which meant no-go or fault in the missiles. And then right after that, the rest of them went down to, red, from green to red, no-go, all 10 within seconds. And so we jumped up, went to our checklist. He went and called the command post back at Maelstrom, and I had two indicators on two of the launch facilities that there was a possible incursion into those areas. We had motion detectors and things like that to detect possible incursions. So I had to call up and send guards out there. When I talked to the main guard, I said, what's the status of this bright light? And he said it just flew off just as I called. So it was up there when these things went down. And of course, we drew the conclusion that somehow this thing affected our missiles. We didn't know how at the time. These things were very reliable. I was there for 3 years on duty and never had any incident even close to losing more than one missile for any reason. And then my commander turned to me and said the same thing happened on another flight. At the time, I thought he meant that evening, but later on, when I researched this in depth, I found out that this was the Echo flight incident. We were an Oscar flight. But that incident happened 8 days earlier, very similar to ours. UFOs were seen over two of the launch facilities. The missiles were all shut down within seconds of that. And the guards that I sent out to look at those other two facilities saw these UFOs again hovering over those sites and probably tripped those indicator lights that I mentioned. So that was about it. The basic information. Any questions on that part?
What was your reaction to wondering what this was at the time?
My reaction was we very certainly could have been under attack. The way the guards were responding, but I couldn't imagine what kind of an attack from some light. I know they were very frightened, but that's what I thought in the moment. But like I said, we were pretty secure where we were, and we weren't going to open that door for anything until we were relieved the next morning.
At what point did you start thinking that it might be something from either, I guess, extraterrestrials or crypto-terrestrials, or something possibly not from a known foreign entity?
Well, I'll tell you, we reported this. After we were relieved by another crew, we were ordered to go to our squadron commander's office, and the first thing I asked him, this was an old World War II bomber pilot. he was white as a sheet. I asked him, was this some sort of an Air Force exercise? Because that's the only thing I could think of to try to explain it. And he said, absolutely not. And then there was a guy from AFOSI in the room, and he basically ordered us to sign an NDA, never to speak about this again to anyone. I complained a little bit about that. We already had above top secret clearances, and we weren't about to, if we were told something was classified, we were certainly not going to talk about it. But he insisted, because this was about this specific incident. So we signed it at that point. And then we were not able to talk about it to the guards again or anyone else. Later, I began to be a little suspicious about what the heck was going on. Because again, this was not any kind of a attack where some other group of people tried to get in our facility. How do you explain this? And we were looking for answers. Each time we went on alert status, we'd have a debrief in a large room. They'd debrief all the crews going out that day on any issues involving the missiles, whether it was some glitch in any of the missile parts or some improvement program they had or anything at all, really. And we never heard anything about our incident, the shutdown of those missiles, or the previous incident, the Echo flight incident, which happened 8 days earlier. So I began to suspect there was some major cover-up going on at that point. Of course, I couldn't talk about it until about 1994. By then, I was out of the Air Force, and I was walking through a bookstore and saw a book called Above Top Secret by Timothy Good. I opened that to page 301, happened to, and right there was a short paragraph talking about UFOs shutting down missiles at Malmstrom Air Force Base in 1966 and 67. And it sounded like my incident. Of course, this had been about, 27 years later after the event. And I had forgotten some of the details. Of course, hadn't talked to anybody about it. And some of the detail just kind of, I'd forgotten the exact location where I was, who my commander was, etc. But I thought, since it was in the book, maybe we could submit a FOIA request to the Air Force and get some information about this. So I did, along with a man from Mutual UFO Network, James Klotz, one of their investigators in the Washington area. This was in Seattle. And we submitted a FOIA request. We didn't say anything about UFOs. We simply referenced this paragraph in this book and asked if they would send us information about that particular shutdown of missiles on that particular date. And so the Air Force wrote back, said, this is classified. However, since it's been so long, we're going to declassify it and we'll send you some documents. And so they did. They started sending us documents on the Echo flight incident, the one that happened on March 16th, 1967. But at that point, I thought that was where I was, because it was described very much like what I remember. And so I started going public. About, I was at Echo Flight when it went down, and it was a UFO event. UFOs were reported and seen by our crew.
Someone on here had commented, if it is UFOs, why would they care about what's going on Earth? Do you have any theory on that?
Well, certainly. These objects knew exactly how our missiles operated. They somehow knew in great detail how to disable the guidance system. In another incident, they displayed their abilities to understand a lot of details about the equipment, how it worked, what its function was, etc. So when I found this out after some years of research, I concluded that they deliberately shut down the missiles to send us a message. Again, there was no damage done to any of the equipment. They simply sent a signal to disable the guidance system. So no damage. They weren't trying to show that they could destroy or damage our missile systems for, let's say a possible invasion, something like that. So there was a message there, and I think the message was, it is absolutely ridiculous to have these weapons of massive, massive destruction for use in a potential war. And that we really should consider getting rid of them. I'm convinced that was the message they had been trying to send. Not only in my case or the Echo incident, but many others throughout different locations of the world where they have come over and I'd say interfered with communications of those missiles, or shut them down, or in one case in Russia and actually Ukraine, when they had nuclear weapons under Russia, they actually started the missile on its launch sequence and shut it down before it launched. So, like I said, they are very aware that we have the capability to destroy the planet, destroy ourselves, and every living thing on this planet, which of course took billions of years to develop. So my guess is they consider this a very special place, planet Earth. All living things on it are special, are important to maintain. And I think they're trying to help us in their own way to save our planet.
Do you think any of it might have to do with they seem to be coming in and out of water a lot, that they could potentially have bases underwater and these things going off could affect down there? Or we've heard some fairly credible people hypothesize that, for instance, that Operation Starfish Prime, which I think was in the 60s, where they set off those nuclear bombs in space, may have been related to actually trying to knock UAPs down, because apparently Russia kind of allowed that test to happen, even though it was during tense times. Do you think there might be any selfish reason for it? Or is it all just they want to protect humanity?
Well, I can't speak to any. I think they have an agenda, but of course, all I can do is speculate. I do know that there have been many witnesses that talk about underwater bases. Actually, some of the people have very close experiences with these extraterrestrials civilizations have been taken to underwater bases. Amazing stories. One that I can think of in particular is from a book called The Dual Soul Connection by um, Hansen is her last name. Trying to think of her first name. I kind of lost it here. Suzy Hansen, Suzyhansen, The Dual Soul Connection, where she describes in great detail taken to an underwater base. So yes, it makes sense to me since very much a lot of our underwater areas are undiscovered or haven't been well known, and so it makes sense that they could hide in underwater different places.
And we hear about this abduction phenomena that might be testing or tagging or potentially some type of genetic work. Do you think there's any credibility to these alleged abduction incidents from your research?
Well, I can speak from experience. I went public on this in 2013, I think. I was taken in 1985. I was in bed in the particular house that I recall with my wife, and we had two small children in other bedrooms. When I woke up suddenly and saw bluish light coming from the living room, and then I told my wife I need to check on this. She saw it also, and I was about to get up off the bed, and I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. I struggled and struggled. I recall sweating it out, trying to get my mobility back. I couldn't. Next thing I see a figure in my doorway of the bedroom. It was a hooded figure. I couldn't see the face, or don't recall seeing the face. And after that, there were small beings in the room. They seemed like children to me at the time. This was way before people were talking about little alien grays, and I didn't know why children would be in the room, but at one point they lifted me off the bed, not using their hands or anything. I just was lifted off the bed and taken to my bedroom window, which I had locked. I didn't think they knew how to unlock it. They were so small. But at any rate, they didn't bother with that. They just took me right through the window. I know that sounds ridiculous, but
I've heard that from multiple people, and I've just to stop there for a second, because we've heard it too for that Brazil Colares incident, that they somehow can penetrate actual walls and windows, which takes some people right out of it when they start hearing that type of thing.
Yeah, well, this is what I'm telling you. I retrieved from 4 different sessions of hypnotherapy in order to recall these things, because I hadn't recalled, again, the details afterwards. And anyway, they took me through the window. There was a bright light in my backyard. And then the next thing I knew, I was on a operating table in a hospital, but it wasn't a hospital. I was shown a long needle. They placed it right in front of my eyes, very long needle, seemed like, and they told me telepathically they were going to insert this into my groin area. but it wouldn't
going
hurt.
through
Like
your
I said.
head? Sorry to laugh about that, but what's going your head when you see this needle and you get that thought and you
Well, I'm sure I was terrified, but they said it wouldn't hurt. So, but when they started their procedure, um, it hurt like hell, and I remember the pain. It was horrendous pain, the worst pain I'd ever felt, and I expressed that to them, and the pain went away almost immediately after I, expressed it was very painful. Um, so again, I'm speculating, but I think they took semen from me um, in that instance. When they were finished, I sat up on the table, escorted by two grays over to a molded seating area in the side of the craft, then taken to another cubicle. Another ET turned me around, poked two fingers down my spine like this, just a gentle touch. And that was that. I was
what
taken
was
out
the
of that room.
texture of the hand like? Did it feel similar to human skin or how did it feel?
I'm sorry, say that again.
For the texture of the skin when the guy was touching you, did he have gloves on or did you have a shirt on or could you feel if his touch felt any different than
I'm pretty sure I was naked, but the touch I don't recall whether it was sharp or soft or whatever. It wasn't painful. I had the feeling he was just checking my nervous system or something. You have the spinal column, uh, but that was that, and that was taken along a corridor. Again, we were floating; we weren't walking. I remember floating along this corridor, and then bright light at the end, and I was back in my bed. Um, Next morning, I didn't recall any of that. Neither did my wife. We didn't speak about it for some 24 years later. We were in Ireland, and there was a lady up there talking about her abduction experience. And she said at one point, then the bedroom filled with blue light, and that triggered something in my head. I asked my wife, who was sitting next to me, if she recalled seeing a blue light in our bedroom at one point, and she said yes. And that's when I knew it was not a dream; it was a real event. Um, and I started getting hypnotherapy sessions at that point.
I recently talked to some scientists who are also engineers that said they were tracking one of these orbs in the New York area and they shot like a flash towards it to try and get a heat reaction. And for about 45 seconds, there was some reaction back that made them unable to move their lower bodies from the waist down, like a paralyzing effect. So from that and hearing you talk, it seems like they might have some type of technology that could quickly paralyze people.
Yeah, they are very advanced. I think again, they know about our genetic makeup. Um, to answer your original question, I think there is some sort of agenda with genetics. They are producing hybrids, I believe, and in great detail, they understand how our physical systems work, except maybe how we perceive pain. But yeah, uh, we just have no idea how far advanced they are in medical sciences, and every other science you could think of.
Do you think if it is a hybrid program, let's say that they are from somewhere else, that they could be creating humanish type creatures or maybe cow type creatures too? Because they seem to be doing a lot of sexual organ removal with the mutilations and having them in other places. Or do you think these alleged hybrids might actually be on Earth as well?
Of course, all this is speculation. I have no way of confirming. I am convinced that the cattle mutilations are going on. I've spoken with people that worked on investigating those in Montana. Forgot the guy's name, but there was a book called Mystery. Let's see, Mystery in the Prairie or something like that. But I'm sorry, I kind of lost thread of your question.
I was trying to ask what you think the purpose of a hybrid experiment or experiment. It's been going on for decades, obviously. These abductions and cattle mutilations since probably when were the first ones noticed, around the 50s?
Cattle mutilations, I think they go back even further than that into the 1800s. However, I couldn't possibly tell you what is going on with this hybridization program or the cattle mutilations. All I know is I'm convinced that they are happening, and the ET is probably involved in that because those objects were observed during some of these mutilations. Again, I can sit here and speculate just as well as anybody, but I'd rather not do that because it's a mystery. And then the book was called Mystery Stalks the Prairie. I forgot the name of the author, but I've seen it on Amazon if you look up that book. But it is one of the best books I've read on cattle mutilations. So I would recommend it.
I will look that up. And I hear cattle mutilations is probably the largest unsolved mystery of all time because there's never been one concretely solved, to my understanding.
Well, by solved, fully explained, no. Some of these have been performed in snowy weather, and there were no tracks involved in when they saw the cattle that had been mutilated, no tracks to or from it. Blood is taken without with great accuracy. A lot of questions. Yeah.
Interesting that book came out in 1976, and we still haven't solved the mystery, which is crazy. But do you think the government knows the answer? I mean, you understand the reason for things to be classified for national security reasons. Do you think they might know what it is after all this time and all the satellites up there? Or do you think nobody knows?
Oh no, I think the government has a wealth of information about all of these subjects. With respect to cattle mutilations, I know that the sheriff's department that was working on this was working under a federal contract under the Department of Agriculture. They told me that. Of course, this is not well known, but that's what they told me. So whatever reports they did, whatever analysis they came up with, they gave it all to the government, and so that right there, they know more about cattle mutilations than anybody else. I think they have recovered craft. I think they've back engineered what they were able to do on recovered craft, and probably even constructed a type of craft that had some similarities to what we're seeing. Um, and I think they recovered um, bodies, genetic material, um, and have analyzed that. So there's a wealth of knowledge that the government is holding from the public uh, unfairly and uh, improperly, not informing the public on this very important subject uh, that we should all be aware of, obviously.
Do you think that it's possible that some of the government craft up there now that's being seen over joint Air Force bases and US Air Force bases all over the world might not just be looking for bombs, which is one of the hypotheses, is that maybe some of these orb like craft that we're seeing flying around in groups of 4 or 5 doing erratic maneuvers, maybe the government's more conventional looking drones and aircraft are actually up there monitoring the unconventional craft that could potentially be UAPs.
Oh, sure, I think that's possible. Um, no question. They are monitoring or trying to monitor uh, anything that might be extraterrestrial coming into our airspace. Um, because, I just told you a story that really happened in 1967, but it goes back even further than that. And so the government would be very interested in trying to monitor our most sensitive facilities and see what these objects are doing.
As a longtime military veteran and former captain, what do you think of the way it's being handled right now as far as the public, the response to the public from the Pentagon basically saying it's nothing to worry about, and some members of the Pentagon saying this could be a 15-year-old kid flying a drone that he picked up at a convenience store? Do you think that's downplaying it too much, or they should say something else that might not aggravate the local politicians who are getting swamped with complaints right now? I admit that's like obviously some of them are civilian drones. Some of them are government aircraft and commercial aircraft, but there definitely seems to be a percentage of them that are legitimately unknown, at least to a lot of people.
Yeah, this recent story that I mentioned earlier on about the possibility that some of these are trying to detect gamma radiation sources to see if there are any dirty bombs in some areas. Uh, there's a good rationale. And by the way, I heard another story I'd like to mention. On December 4th, apparently there was a meeting of 5 nuclear weapons powers in Dubai, uh, and they met to discuss their nuclear weapons policy or nuclear policies of each country. And I think part of the reason for that is because uh, if they are also seeing drones, let's say, or using drones, they could be mistaken for some sort of attack on their infrastructure locations and possibly retaliate. I know this is a real problem with Pakistan and India because they have also drones and are monitoring the respective armies because they are currently at war with each other over the over a particular region, Kashmir, and And again, they're both nuclear powers, and I don't know if they could be brought to the point where they would use nuclear weapons in response in their war. So the point is, we have to be concerned about misinterpretation of UFOs over nuclear weapon sites as being some sort of a drone uh, and could instigate some retaliation that we would not like to see. So, to go back to your other question, though, the I know the Congress is very frustrated right now with not being able to get answers from government agencies, even though they've passed regulations requiring that. And of course, they established Arrow, and in order to do that, to try to get agencies to tell them what they know about the UAP or UFO subject, and they're not getting anywhere. And that's because of the high secrecy that the DoD and the intelligence community places on what they know about these objects. We can argue about why they're doing that, why they're keeping it secret, but the fact remains that they are spending money, public funds, to do various projects. They're learning things about these objects and not telling anyone, including members of Congress, what their conclusions are. So this has got to come to a head. I think, when I was in Washington last, speaking with Nancy Mace, one of the congresswomen who had run the hearing November 13th, a lot of Congress people are getting very frustrated with the lack of openness by these agencies, and there will be more hearings. There will be more attempts at accountability. This isn't going to go away anytime soon. So I think we're on a good road right now.
I'm not familiar with this, but there's a fan here that wants to know more about the 10-ton silo hatch cover being blasted off. Is this from one of your books, or are they talking about something totally different?
Well, it was actually 20 tons is what I was told. But this was 1968, Minot Air Force Base. B-52 was coming into land and was ordered to not land and circle around this particular area of course, Minot is another missile base. And so they were ordered to fly around this launch facility where the missile is located. And while they were doing that, they were chased by a UFO. And it landed near this particular launch facility. And one of the co-pilot, man by the name of Bradford Runyon, was able to sketch the object on the ground, describe the colors of it. And then the B-52 came into land and reported to a general officer that wanted to talk to them about this. And the general officer informed them that the 20-ton cover of the launcher tube, where the missile is, had been simply removed and placed to the side of the launcher. Now, normally the way this cover is removed is through a rail system, like a train rail system, which is operated by a large motor, etc., prior to launch. And if that doesn't work, we would blow it off with explosive bolts. But this thing was simply lifted off its railing system and placed to the side. Now, that's an impossibility without heavy equipment, etc. Excuse me. And but this happened during this particular incident that they were asked to look at. And this is a very well documented incident, by the way. A lot of the crew members of that B-52 were interviewed. Other people were interviewed, and there's a lot of good, valid, supportable information in that investigation. I recommend you look up Tom Tullien, Tullien, on YouTube. And he's got a lot of, I'm sure he's got a video. I've got videos of Brad Runyon, and I've got his affidavit, his signed affidavit, talking about this.
Yes, you have a YouTube channel as well.
And I have a YouTube channel as well under Bob Salas, Salas, at Giant Head 3.
So as far as the other incursions that happened at the Air Force Base you were stationed at, I don't think you were there for the 1966 incident, but apparently 30 missiles were disabled, and there was about 10 other incidents after that, also disrupting missiles and weapons.
Okay, as far as the number 30 goes, there was an incident in, again, Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota in September of 1966. Very similar to our own. All 10 missiles were disabled after UFOs were seen over missile sites. And then the Echo flight incident happened in March of 67 at Malmstrom. And then the Oscar incident, my incident, happened on March 24th, 1967. So within a span of 6 months, we lost 30. By lost, I mean disabled, 30 nuclear weapons missiles within the span of 6 months during UFO encounters. That's where that 30 number comes from. But in my book, my latest book, you can see a listing of about 13 cases of incidents where UFOs came over nuclear storage facilities and weapons facilities and shown a beam of light and or disrupted communications at those facilities. 13 separate incidents of UFOs involved with nuclear weapons sites.
There's been so many of these nuclear weapons sites, incursion incidents declassified now. Why do you think more people don't take it seriously? And how has it changed? Because it has changed a lot in the last few years since you first came out with your book, Faded Giant, back in 2005. There was still a lot of stigma about this subject. It's only been about the past 5 or 7 years that things seem to be opening up. Now we're at the point, if we call them drones, we're allowed to talk about them and not be made fun of, it seems. But could you just talk about that, the change of things and why nobody is taking this nuclear threat seriously enough?
It goes back to what I talked about before, is we can't get the Department of Defense or intelligence community agencies to admit to these incidents. And even though the Congress has tried through hearings to get information out, those hearings have been pretty much secondhand witnesses that have said, I heard from some guy, I can't tell you who the guy is or where the base is, so I can't talk about it, blah, blah, blah. And so it's still not clearly in the public perception. And of course, the media has failed to take up this issue seriously, probably because they don't want to lose access to any people they know within those DoD and intelligence agencies that might help them with other stories in the future. And so it just has not had the impact on the public mind that it should have had. And I think that will change if we have witnesses that will swear under oath in a public hearing, a public setting on national television, um, and not say things like, "I can't talk about that." We'll actually give the details of their experiences, like I would, of course, if I were called. I'm working on that right now. Hopefully, in the future, I will be able to do that very thing, testify before a congressional hearing.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Now, I did bring this up earlier, and you being a former military guy, I just want to get your opinion on it. The people that are claiming this Starfish Prime military nuclear test that allegedly happened when Russia and the US were at the height of their tensions together. They blew up some nuclear bombs in space, and some people from the time are alleging this was actually to knock out UAPs that were flying around up there, and that's why Russia made an agreement with the US to allow these to be tested, because people are saying if Russia didn't want this to happen, these tests could have started a war. Do you think there's any chance that could be true, or is this just a total conspiracy theory in your opinion?
This is the first time I'm hearing about this, but I'm noticing here this happened in July of 1962. And that was just before the Cuban Missile Crisis, which occurred in I think October of '62. I doubt if the U.S. would have cooperated with the Russians on exploding nuclear weapons in space at that time in 1962. We were very much concerned about a Russian threat from Cuba and other places, their intercontinental ballistic missile program. So,
I think your monitor moved a bit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Again, I hadn't really thought about this. I hadn't researched it, so I can't really offer a good opinion about your question. But
you may have heard that some people think that the electromagnetic pulses from nuclear weapons might have at one point been able to knock them out. But of course, this was decades ago, and their technology probably changed by then, if that was true.
Well, it's true that anytime there's a nuclear weapon test, there will be some electromagnetic force or field emanate from that very test or explosion. That part is true. However, about as far as knocking out missiles that would have affected, if it happened in my instance, for example, it would have affected missiles throughout our country, and including all the ones we had in Montana. And none of that happened. I mean, we lost them there at our particular site in, like I said, the 24th of March, and then separately at Echo on the 16th of March. And actually, we checked records of the Department of Energy on nuclear weapons tests during that period, and there were no tests in that period in 1967.
Interesting. As far as the use of drones by the US Department of Defense, as someone who also used to use drones in the military, what are some of the multiple uses they are used for?
Well, they can be used for gaining intelligence over territories, photography. Uh, they're used as weapons, obviously. They've been used in Ukraine against Ukrainian forces. Uh, and we used them as target drones for, training interceptor pilots. Uh, well, that's what I can think of right now.
Did you ever hear about the story where supposedly in 1963 a UAP disrupted a nuclear test silo or test missile being dropped? It's in Robert Hastings' book about UFOs and nukes.
Yeah, I don't recall that one in 1963.
Yes, supposedly.
No, I know I'm not familiar with that. I'd have to go back and look at it.
In your opinion, would they actually stop a war? Because a lot of people think, oh, don't worry, the aliens are going to stop an actual nuclear missile if it's fired. But then you hear the cases that it may have just been able to test the launch system, where you mentioned earlier about that case of, I guess, a Russian launching site in the Ukraine where they actually engaged one, I guess you could say. And I hear that may have happened in the US at one point as well, but it didn't actually fire.
Could you rephrase that question? I think I missed your.
Yeah. Do you think that UAPs would actually stop a nuclear missile if one was to be fired? Because there's been cases of them trying to set them off and other cases of them disabling them. But it appears that their attempts to set them off may just have been a test to see our reaction, and they may not have had the actual intention of setting them off.
No, I have no way of knowing whether they would stop a missile from being launched. I wouldn't count on it. People think that because they are able to disable missiles or stop a launch, as they did in that one in Russia, that they would do that in case of an actual intentional launch of missiles. There are arguments both ways. On the one way, yeah, they consider our planet very special and would want to stop a nuclear war at all costs. On the other hand, as long as we have shown that we're unable to change our ways and maintain a large nuclear arsenal, which might impact them if a nuclear war occurred. We don't know what kind of an impact that would have on their civilization and others in the galaxy or cosmos. So we don't have those answers, and we certainly can't depend on them stopping a nuclear war. I think they would like to see us take seriously the possibility of nuclear war and make every attempt to try to abolish these weapons, which we tried to do under START II treaty under the Obama administration. One of the objectives was to work towards zero nukes. This was a treaty signed between the U.S. and Russia, and that was a part of that treaty to work towards getting to zero on nuclear weapons.
Is there any way that what's going on right now could be seen as good? What would be the best case scenario of these drone incursions? Somebody's asking.
Well, I personally think this puts, if this puts pressure on the DoD to come up with answers. Again, there's a lot of frustration in Congress, and if they were to call another hearing with witnesses like myself and others who can testify to the fact that UFOs have been seen over nuclear weapons bases and interfered interfered. That kind of testimony would put more pressure on DoD to be more transparent in what they know about what's going on with these drones. I think the public is clamoring for it, and until we get a definitive answer, I think there will still be interest in getting those answers.
For the people that say that this is just a black operations test to expose the security issues within the United States government, how do you think this makes the government any safer if they are actually seeming like anyone can fly over this airspace now with a drone, which I'm sure isn't really the case, but that seems to be how they're talking about, like, these things are flying over us, don't worry about it, there's no immediate threat. It kind of makes us look weak.
It should be a worry to them that these drones can fly over restricted airspace, which they've done many times, even over Langley, which is CIA headquarters. Again, the public's going to continue to ask for answers from the Department of Defense and question the idea that it's nothing to worry about and we're all safe. That doesn't make any sense at all. It's not convincing to anybody without definitive statements as to what they are and where they come from and their capabilities.
As far as the alleged visitors, do you think there could be multiple races? You mentioned in your abduction case, it seemed like they were gray aliens. Do you think there's multiple types coming from multiple places?
Yes. My incident is just one of many, many that where individuals have described different types of beings. Even in my case, I saw two types. One was a large, tall being that was showing me that needle. And the other, of course, was the small grays. But I know others have described Nordic-looking people that look much like us. And again, other kinds of different types of people are creatures or beings. So yeah, there's no doubt multiple races visiting us. So we're on their radar. We're known to them, and many of them may have different agendas with regards to us. They may not be cooperating on with the others. Who knows? But the more we know, of course, the better we'll be prepared. And again, that speaks to responsibility of our government to let us, the public, know what we're facing here, so we can plan collectively for what to do about it. Who knows, but that our government has already declared internally that these are all enemies of Earth and should be wiped out, and have developed weapons to do that. We don't know that. The public doesn't know that, if that's the case. But it shouldn't be, that kind of a decision shouldn't be made by a select few people in government.
We know you were 60 feet underground. We always hear about underground bases and things like that with the military. How much do you think goes on underground?
Well, that's a heck of a question. uh, Clearly, we were able to build structures underground, no question about it, and deep underground. Um, I've heard stories from people that I trust that even our government has built very deep bases, uh, almost a mile deep, uh, underground. So who knows? Who knows? Tyler Roberts. Who knows what that's being used for? Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. We're winding it down here now, anyways. As far as President Trump, he said he's going to disclose. He's hinted at it, anyways, both the JFK files as well as the alien files. What do you think of the chances of this actually happening? We've heard some congressmen, such as Congressman Tim Burchett, saying he believes this could happen as early as within the next 5 months.
Well, if he does follow through and order and get results of releasing information which has been classified on what various agencies have been doing with respect to UAP over the years, over the many almost 80 years. I will applaud that, no matter who does that, but we'll have to wait and see. Promises are tricky things. They can be made thinking, yeah, it's possible to do this and not getting results. But like I said, I think there is a strong desire now from many members of Congress on both sides to get some answers. And so that is building, that momentum is building, and I'm hopeful that'll happen soon.
As far as when you think, in theory, these drone incursions will stop, or this drone surveillance, do you see it stopping before President Trump gets inaugurated? Because a lot of people are predicting this might go on at least till as long as that, with seemingly, at least from what's being told to us, is the public just going to have to be just told over and over and over again, nothing's going to happen as we get used to these? Or are they hoping that at some point we're going to stop asking questions? Where do you see this going? Or is it going to be something horrible and we're all going to die here at the end of this?
I have no idea, Devin. I couldn't possibly give you an intelligent answer on that question. No. The best we can do is see what happens on a day-to-day basis, and hope for the best.
So you mentioned your books are on Amazon. I put a few up here, Faded Giants, and then your most recent one, and I'll find your. What could you tell us about the books that you've presented so far, and particularly this new one, which I would guess has the most up-to-date information in it?
Yeah, that first one that I wrote in 2005 has a lot of the documentation we received under the Freedom of Information Act. At the time, I thought it was the most accurate. However, I think there was a question still in 2005 as to how many of the missiles went down, and that was later confirmed by another witness, Robert Jameson. The latest book is the most up to date on the details of my incident and many others. Many of you, your audience may not have heard of, such as the one in the Netherlands in, I think it was 1991 or 92, where a UFO was seen by many airmen, both Dutch and U.S. Air Force, located a particular base in Soesterberg, the Netherlands. UFO flew down the flight line and shone beam of light on nuclear weapons that was stored there. So I think it's the most up to date, probably for anyone that's interested in this subject. And I also would like to mention my website, spiralgalaxy.org. Spiralgalaxy, all one word, .org. And if you'll click on the link that says Malmstrom Air Force Base incidents, you'll see a lot of the witness testimony, such as, excuse me, the tape recordings I made with some of the major witnesses, also other documents and materials in support of my case.
Very good, and I'll just put that up for the fans right now. I'll just share your website for a second. By the way, how do you feel about the world being more open to UFO discussion these days compared to, I guess, the 1960s when you first became interested in this, to 2006 when you first put your books out, to now?
Yeah, I think there's an explosion of interest. Many, many more people throughout the world are interested in this subject now because of, well, efforts by a lot of people, really. I think we'll see even more interest as the years go by. I know the United Nations is thinking about putting in an office on this particular topic. And we will get some movement in Congress, I'm certain, within the years to come.
Have you heard that there might be another congressional hearing that might be about a week long coming up with multiple witnesses of people that might include people like yourself?
Well, I have heard rumors of another hearing coming soon. I don't know how long it'll be, who they're going to invite, but hopefully I and others like me will get to tell their stories, firsthand stories, like I said, with real details and not just comments like, I can't talk about that.
Well, when they do make comments like that, like David Grush had said that, we're going to have to talk about this in a skiff. I understand he still hasn't been in a skiff. Do you understand their reasoning? Like they might be punished, have to go to jail if they break that? Or do you think they would still be put in jail if they talk publicly on such a large scale on that type of topic?
Well, I think that's part of the issue. They need to be released from their oaths or NDAs where they were told in no uncertain terms that they must maintain secrecy or go to jail. So that's part of it. The other part is there is a very strong, well-organized group within government, I'm convinced, that is doing everything they possibly can to maintain secrecy for various reasons, various motivations. But I do believe they exist. They're very powerful, and they're part of the reason that we aren't getting the answers today.
Very interesting. Well, I thank you very much for your service. You've had lots of fellow service members salute you in the comments during this broadcast. And I really appreciate you enlightening us on your experience and research today. And you can close this off with whatever you want to tell the viewers.
Well, stay optimistic on this subject. I am remaining optimistic that we will learn more facts in the future and hopefully soon. And everybody have a Merry Christmas.